First of all, I'd really like to give a special thanks to Oregon Coast Community College, to Dave Price and Chris, who are helping us out tonight. This equipment is awesome, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much. So as I noted, we will be live streamed, so we have to remember to talk into our microphones. And it's going also to be recorded and shared with any media who would like the recording on the league's website. I know that the public radio, KYAQ, I always get those letters mixed up, is planning on airing it again. So it will be replayed in a number of places. The League of Women Voters is really committed to voter education and an informed electorate. So we very much appreciate you being here and listening tonight. Some of the other things that we do are the Voter's Guide, which is slightly different than the Voter's Pamphlet that comes out. We ask the questions that we ask the participants to answer, but it's free to them, as opposed to their statements that you have to purchase in the statewide Voter's Pamphlet. And along with that, we have now up and running vote411.org, which is our voter's guide. An individual can go into it, put in your name and address, and it will take you directly to all the races that are on your ballots, which came out yesterday at my house anyway. They arrived, so that's great. And the voter's guide are in some various places around town and libraries and that sort of thing. We try to get them out and available to folks. So we are going to begin this evening. Unfortunately, two of our candidates are not able to attend, and they have submitted some written comments, but it's going to change the structure of what a League of Women Voters Forum usually looks like. And I am going to welcome any questions from the audience. So I think that these little white cards have been passed around. If you have a question that you want to ask of any or all of the candidates, just fill them out, and folks from the league who are here in attendance, Georgia and Jay right up here in front, will get them up to me, and I try to kind of go through them and munch them together, rephrase when they're similar, that kind of thing. The structure for the evening is going to be that we're going to begin with these two nice ladies sitting in front of us, the candidates unopposed for county clerk and county treasurer. And after their session, we will move to State Representative Dave Gomberg. And I have some prepared comments from his opponent, Celeste McEntee. And then we will offer time to Casey Miller, running for county commissioner in position number 1. And again, some written responses to questions from his opponent. The questions that I presented to those candidates are the same ones that were offered to candidates in the voter's guide and the online vote411.org. Not everyone responded to the league's request for answers to those questions. So I figured we'd use them again and they'd get another shot at answering them tonight. So that is our plan for the evening. And then we're going to bring up some of the city folks who are here and try to just have kind of an interactive conversation between city, county, and state government levels and see if we can solve all the problems of the world here this evening. So if you have any burning questions for something that relates in that general area, we'll be more than happy to take a look at them and see what we can do. I should introduce myself. I am Jean Cowan. I'm a member of the Lincoln County League of Women Voters. And for those who don't know me, I'm a former elected official, served several years as mayor in a small town in Eastern Oregon, came to Lincoln County, served 12 years as county commissioner, and then 6 in the state legislature. So I have a little bit of familiarity with how things work at various levels. And I think the conversation we have planned could be really interesting. I'm a little bit hesitant to introduce all of the city elected officials who are here this evening because I'm not sure that I know who all is here. And I know that there are some other folks running for city councils in other areas. Any of you that are associated with city government, could you wave your hands? Okay. Well, I know that Dean and Susan are here, and thank you for coming and being with us this evening. It's a significant expenditure of personal time to serve an elected office, whether it's compensated or uncompensated, like city government and down. And so I truly do appreciate all of the time and energy that folks put into it. And I do thank you for coming. So as I said, we are going to begin with our two candidates. For Jane Welch for County Treasurer. You are currently serving as our County Treasurer, am I correct, Jane? And Amy Southwell, who will be stepping into the shoes of Dana Jenkins, who's been there for I don't know how many years. And so if the two of you would grab your microphones here, what I'd like to do is just give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves and tell our audience a little bit about what your position is. I know particularly County Treasurer is a job that nobody knows what it is. Way back in the day when Linda Pitzer and I were running for office, she clutched her little cards and everywhere we went, tried to tell people what a county treasurer does. And I don't think anybody ever figured it out. So Jane, could we begin with you?
Amazing woman, Linda Pitzer. She actually hired me, so quite fond of her, and she did an amazing job as well.
She's still a good friend.
Okay, so good evening and welcome everyone. My name is Jane Welch, your current treasurer and tax collector. I'll begin by telling you a bit about each office and how they're related. The tax collector is just that. I have some additional information that you may not be aware of. Bound by statutory requirements, the collection of property taxes supports the local Lincoln County General Fund and all the taxing districts within Lincoln County, such as hospitals, libraries, pools, and road districts, to name a few. Our team of 4, including myself, facilitate getting you your tax statements and notices timely. This year, we'll be mailing them out today, October 20th. These statements will look a little different this year in a good way. For instance, they will now have the site address listed on your statement. Mid-June of this year, we implemented a new tax software system, which is an enhancement from the 1980s DOS software system we previously used. So quite an enhancement. With that said, some of the enhancements that relate to our citizens is you can find your tax statements now online, your receipt history and general information at our website. You can also pay your property taxes online at this portal. Welcome to the new age of technology, finally. The treasurer, again, bound by statutory requirements, distributes all of the property taxes collected to the local districts of Lincoln County. The treasurer and staff of 1 receipts all the monies that flow through the county for such things as a visit to one of our parks, riding the bus, or getting a permit from our planning department. We also distribute funds to our local school districts with monies that we receive from the state of Oregon and other federal funds. There are many duties of the treasurer, such as applying for federal grants, creating a budget, balancing bank statements, investing, and district fund balancing. We are mindful to balance to the penny because that's what we do. Thank you for your time and consideration this evening. If you have any questions, I'm happy to assist. I look forward to serving you in my next term as your Lincoln County Treasurer and Tax Collector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. Next up is Amy Southwell, running for County Clerk. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming out tonight.
We'll need to project to the audience.
A little louder. Sorry.
Yeah, unfortunately, the microphone isn't
Oh, okay.
amplifying. There we go.
Well, thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for the League of Women Voters for having me tonight. Not really being too much out in the public eye. It's kind of nice to come out and kind of tell a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the clerks. Although I've seen many of you filing for offices before, as Dana's kind of right-hand person, I'm now about to take that job. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So as you know, my name is Amy Southwell and I'm running for Lincoln County Clerk. I've lived in Lincoln County my whole life, except for when I went to college and moved away for a few years. My husband, who is here tonight, also grew up in Lincoln County, and we decided to move back here to raise a family. I'm a proud mother of 2 boys. I have worked in public service for most of my adult life, with the last 9 years being at the clerk's office as chief deputy clerk. So needless to say, working for our community has always been a passion of mine. So now the fun part, enough about me. What does a clerk do? Clerks actually wear many hats. As you all know, what we're here for tonight is the main one is elections. We conduct up to 4 elections a year. That includes all federal, state, county, and special district elections. We are actually, this year we've done the primary, a recall, and now we're in the general. So luckily only 3. We maintain Lincoln County voter registration database, which now we have over 40,000 voters in Lincoln County. When I started in 2013, we had 23,000. We maintain all candidate filings as well as help candidates file for office. The clerk supervises recording of all documents related to all real property in Lincoln County. In 2021, we recorded 16,000 documents. The clerk oversees the recording of all commissioner journals, so all the documents of their weekly meetings. We assign document numbers and labels to them and index them to the county system. Our office issues and records all marriage license in Lincoln County, or purchased in Lincoln County. And the clerk also has the ability to perform marriage ceremonies. We maintain all county archives as well as hold district budgets for the public to inspect if they wish to. Another component that we do that a lot of people don't know about is called BOPTA. The clerk oversees and organizes it, and it's called, what it stands for is Board of Property Tax Appeals, which is the process for people to appeal the assessment of their land or home value, not their taxes, which is confusing to some people. The clerk provides direction and help to interpret laws to the board. The board is an independent board that we hire to come on and help people throughout the community with this process. So we are that third party. The other thing that we do, we supervise issuing of county business license and liquor license for special events. Lincoln County serves as the passport agent for the county, so we do a lot of passports. We didn't do a whole lot when the pandemic first happened, but now that things are slowly opening up, people are coming in like crazy. So I wanted to take just a moment and share a little about what my focus and goals for clerk are going to be. My main priority is to work to regaining voters' trust in Lincoln County. In the past couple of years, there has been so much misinformation about elections and voting in Oregon. I've had the privilege to work with and learn from probably one of the most knowledgeable, trustworthy clerks in Oregon, Dana Jenkins. I will continue his great work and help voters to understand more about the election process and educate them on things that they do not understand about the election laws and procedures. With more and more people moving into Oregon that did not have vote by mail, but are used to the polling places, my job as clerk is to help them realize that vote by mail is a secure and convenient way for Lincoln County voters to cast their vote. My goal has and always will be to get the voter their ballot and to have transparent, secure elections. Voters need to know that the decade-old mail system that we have been using has many checks and balances to provide this. Oregonians should be proud that the clerks in this state are a dedicated group of people that all have the same goal, to get ballots out to the voters and to conduct fair, secure, transparent elections. My hope is that if the voters are still unsure or skeptical of any of our practices, they'll learn the whole process and see how we handle elections in Oregon. I am so privileged to be your next county clerk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to interject quickly. If anyone should have a question for either of these two individuals, if you could let these folks know and get it up to me pretty quickly, we can give them a chance to answer. I wanted to mention, Amy, that you're also welcoming observers to the ballot counting process, I believe, and those are people sign up through the parties. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
so the primary, we've always had the option for observers to be a part of our process. It's just never really been something that a lot of people wanted to observe. But now, like I said, in the last couple of years, it's not only Oregon, it's kind of everywhere, but we've allowed parties, they've reached out more. We've allowed parties so to come in and we have an area in where because we have many steps to the process. You know, your ballots come in and we check the signatures. So that's one viewing part. The next is watching the election women, opening and doing the process of the ballots. And then the other is watching Dana, or it was me in the primary, running the ballots through the machine. So we have all these checks and balances so people can watch. So yes, each member of the Democrat and Republican Party, no other parties have reached out, but we'll be able to observe one in each area, in one area and one in the other area. And we have sign up sheets and it's been really well organized and we're excited for this time.
So have you noticed any changes in the observer process in recent years? Is one of the questions that was.
Yeah, I mean, that we haven't had a lot of people wanting to do it, except this last primary was a big one. The one thing I will say from letting the observers, we let them close up and personal with us in May. So they were up around us. And I have a couple ladies from my office here tonight and they'll attest to that. They were right by us, watching signature verification, doing everything. And both parties were amazed at our process and were like, we had no idea. No, because people don't know what, and just like every job, no one understands exactly every little thing we do. But like I said, I've been working with Dana for so long that we have such a way we do things that it's so important that people really do know how great it is.
Thank you.
That's
So
okay.
if somebody were interested in participating, there's still.
Yeah, I
time
would.
that they could
I would
contact
honestly
you?
say contact our office. You know, if they're a member of a certain party, definitely we'll probably tell them to reach out to that. The PCP chairs are usually the ones that are organizing it, and we'd probably have them reach out to them.
And I know that you can give them that contact.
Oh,
information.
absolutely.
I didn't happen to bring it with me.
Yeah,
this
no
evening,
problem.
so Thank you. I was interested, Jane, when you said you have to balance everything to the penny. It brought back a memory. One evening in the parking lot, I ran into Linda as we were getting ready to leave, and she was so frustrated. And I said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "I'm a penny off and I can't find it." So I made some stupid inane comment like, "Here, you want a penny?" She turned kind of bright red and was not impressed with my comment. So I learned quickly that that's taken very seriously in your office.
It's very, very serious, extremely
We have a
serious.
question here about tiny homes on wheels. Are they not considered real property for tax purposes? I know you're not the
Yeah,
assessor's office.
That's actually
and
an assessor question because the
Right.
assessor does the valuations and we in our office as tax collector, we bill and collect, which a lot of folks don't know that. On your tax statement, you'll see a phone number for valuation, which will go to the assessment team, and then one for tax, which will go to us. So in answer to that question, there's been a lot of controversy on it, and my best advice would be to contact Joe Davidson, our current county assessor.
Thank you for clarifying that. And the other question is about ballot measures and how they get there. I think everybody understands the initiative process, but there are some that have surprised some voters about tax increases in special districts around the county. And they were wondering how that comes to be.
Well, typically, so like the state measures that are put on there, obviously that's done at the state level. That'll be in your voters pamphlet. Our measures that are put on locally are brought about that particular district brings it, usually their board brings in an initiative or whatever it is. And, they go through a process of trying to get, where we get it approved. And then that's pretty much how it's on there. It's usually brought forward with these, like fire districts or something, trying to get a little more tax increase
So
or need
the
something.
Special districts like fire or
Yeah, water.
those sorts of things. It really rests with the board of
The board,
directors of that.
the board is
special
what brings it on. Yeah.
district who
The port,
decides to
all of them
propose.
decide if, hey, we need more money to run this. That's usually what it comes up with.
Well, it's been very informative and I appreciate your time very much. Thank you. We're going to switch seats here now. Oh, okay, maybe I pulled it down too far. I thought I was looking at it. Thank you. We'll just get you both up here and that'll save a little bit of chair shuffling. So now I'm going to shuffle my papers for just a second here and try to find out where I am. Right there. So we're going to begin with State Representative David Gomberg and the comments from his opponent, Celeste McAtee. And as I mentioned, what I did was pose to you the three questions that the league developed that we also put on Vote 411 and in our voters guide. So let's start with the first question and I will find her answer. The question is, describe what you see as the two most pressing issues for the next legislative session. What legislation would you propose to address these issues? And the answer from Celeste McAtee is, I believe the roles and responsibilities of a state legislator is to represent the needs of my district, be effective voice for my community. For too long, Salem has been dominated by one-party rule. Because of this, our state has foregone balanced and nuanced debate with regard to some of the most pressing issues we face. Our region is one of the most dynamic and diverse areas of Oregon and a backbone for the rest of the state. Still, we find ourselves struggling with basic issues like homelessness and public safety. When I am in Salem, these issues will be a top priority to tackle for the constituents of House District 10. Rep. Gomberg, would you like me to repeat that question?
No, thank you. I'll be absolutely fine. Thank you so much, Jean, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum tonight. And I appreciate all of you who have come out on a foggy October evening to learn more about your government and the candidates that are offering themselves to represent you there. And I want to thank the vast internet audience that is with us as well tonight, who may either be watching us live or watching the recording. These events are so very, very important. They're important because elections are not about lawn signs. Elections are not about shiny brochures that show up in the mail or digital media. They're about you. And they're about your priorities, your concerns, and well selecting the people that you want to best address those concerns. So let me turn to your question, which is the two highest priorities that we're going to be looking at in Salem. And I don't think there's any question that across our entire state, the most important issues are housing and childcare and finding people for the jobs that we can't fill, particularly here at the coast. Now, those issues are different in each part of the state, and they're unique in our part of the state. But across the state, I think those issues are consistently at the top of everybody's list. And believe me, there will be dozens of legislators who will be working on those issues in Salem next year. I'll be one of them. But there will not be dozens of legislators working on unique issues that are critically important to us here on the Central Coast of Oregon. And I want to touch on two of them, if I may. The first one is being better prepared for natural disasters. Now, Susan and I live, as I think many of you know, north of Lincoln City. We're in the Echo Mountain Fire Zone. We worked for years to prepare for an earthquake, never imagining that our plans would be needed when we were ordered with very few minutes in the middle of the dark morning to evacuate. We need to be better prepared here on the coast. And one of the proposals that I will bring forward next year is to ask our schools to spend one day a year preparing kids for natural disasters. Now, right now, we spend time in our schools preparing for fires and earthquakes and very sadly for active shooter drills. But we don't tell kids how to get ready for those things. We only tell them what to do when it's actually happening. And I'd like to spend time preparing our kids for how to communicate with their parents if you're separated when that awful day comes. How many Go Kits do you need? What do you put into a Go Kit? Where do you keep them? Or perhaps for older kids to learn about first aid and communications and ham radio and our wonderful CERT programs. I want to teach our kids how to prepare for natural disasters. And I believe if we take one day a year in our schools with age appropriate information, the kids will take that information home and they'll better prepare their families, their parents, and their grandparents. The other thing is that our hospitals here on the coast are only 3 days ready with water. We're asking our families to be 3 weeks ready, and our hospitals only have 3 days supply of drinkable water or fuel. And I'm introducing legislation to provide grant dollars so that our local hospitals can upgrade and be ready to prepare the support that's needed, whether it's an earthquake, a tsunami, a fire, a flood, or whatever else Mother Nature may throw at us. That's issue number one. And I'm quickly going to say issue number two is that small towns on the Oregon coast don't have the money they need for big projects in upgrading our infrastructure, our water systems, our sewer systems, our ports, our public buildings. I've had some success in the last 2 years bringing money home, 17 different projects in Lincoln County totaling about $70 million. I'm going to keep doing that work because nobody else is going to be standing up for us to get those dollars that we need here at home. And if we can't get them from the state or from the federal government, then we're going to have to ask our local taxpayers to shoulder multi-million-dollar bills with local property taxes, and that's just not going to work.
Thank you. I told you I wasn't going to give you quite as tight a timeline, but we may have to tone it down just a little bit.
So you'll have to ask easier questions.
Okay. Great. Let's start with you with question number 2. Easier. What should the legislature do to improve the quality of Oregon's K-12 public schools?
Look, we've got issues in our schools across the state right now, no question about that. And I'm looking at the numbers here in Lincoln County, and I'm seeing how many of our kids are in poverty. Interestingly, in my new district that now includes part of Benton County, our child poverty rate is twice as high. Our number of kids in foster care is twice as high, and our graduation rates are lower than they are in other parts of the state. So 2 years ago, I voted in support of the Student Success Act, a program that's going to produce $1 billion, $1 billion with a B, to support our schools, to reduce class sizes, to hire more teachers, to compensate our educators, and to provide more counselors. $1 billion. That measure will bring $7 million here home to Lincoln County. Now, the problem is that after we passed the bill, we had this little thing called the pandemic. And that made it a little bit more difficult to implement the benefits of that bill. So I think it's important that we look to the future and making sure that the Student Success Act is well managed and well implemented. Now, that being said, we still need to make sure that our schools are safe and effective and well staffed. And we need to look to programs like a great program here at our own community college that allows our high school students to earn credits both in high school and in the community college at the same time, not spending the money that they would normally have to spend to go off to college, and in some cases getting their associate degree and their high school diploma on the same day. We have the means to improve education here in Oregon. In the legislature, we're voting forward the dollars, but we're going to have to turn to local school boards to make sure that it is well managed and well invested.
Thank you. The same question was posed to Celeste McAtee, and her answer is, it is essential that our schools return to teaching academic fundamentals to our kids, reading, writing, and math. The legislature should help assist schools in refocusing on those basic tenets. It is also important to recognize that one-size-fits-all approach does not work for schools, especially in our community. It is important that students and families have choice in educational opportunities including career and technical education. Okay, we'll move now to question number 3. And I'm very sorry. Before too long. The third question is, what state action will you take to implement the limits on campaign contributions and expenditures that the Oregon voters approved in 2020? And the response from Ms. McEntee, ballot measure 107 gave the legislature the ability to pass campaign finance regulations. I will certainly listen and take into account all voices in the campaign finance reform space. It will be imperative that we maintain transparency in elections while also protecting and preserving Oregonians' political speech. Any campaign finance reform that is pursued must be balanced and fair to both parties and not favor one kind of funding stream over another. Your shot at this question.
Well, again, thank you for the question. And let me tell you that I submitted all of my answers to the league a month ago or more that they were posted into your webpage. And in that case, you limited us to 200 words. So I appreciate the opportunity to drill down just a little bit deeper.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Look, in Oregon, the Constitution says that money is speech. Boy, think about that for a minute. Money is speech. So the more money you have, the more speech you get. The Oregon legislature, and I was proud to support the measure, suggested a change to our Constitution that would allow us to come back and make changes to campaign finance in Oregon. It was a 2-step process. First, you open up the Constitution so we can do it, and then you come back to the legislature and you actually do it. And we need to do that this next session. We've got people that put millions of dollars into individual campaigns. And believe me, they get a lot more to say about what's going on in those elections than you or I do. So we need to put those meaningful limits in place. I will support that, but let's not kid ourselves. After we put limits on how much candidates can spend, we're still going to be challenged by people who have a lot of money that are going to spend it outside of the candidate process and through what we call super PACs or dark money or independent expenditures. And we need to address that as well. We need to rein in the role of money in politics, both here in Oregon and across the country.
Thank you. I don't think any of us here this evening who are so tired of the ads on television would disagree with you at that particular point. I do have one question, Rep. Gomberg, that wonders if you could comment on ballot measure 113. That is the ballot measure that addresses unexcused absences. Let's try again. Absences amongst legislators.
There are 4 measures that you're going to be voting on this election. One of them deals with universal health care. One of them deals with removing the slavery from the Oregon Constitution. Think about that for just a second. One of them deals with firearms, and one of them deals with unexcused absences from the Oregon legislature. And the measure says if you have more than 10 unexcused absences, that you can't run for re-election. Boy, what would happen if you had 10 unexcused absences from your job? I know what would happen when I ran a business, and if somebody simply didn't show up and they didn't get 10 opportunities to do that before we tried to address it. But what's going on here in Oregon is that Oregon has an unusually high quorum requirement in the legislature. You have to have 2/3 of the members present to do any business. And that allows the minority to say, if we simply don't show up, they're not going to be able to pass things we don't like. Now, the Democrats have done that in the past, and in the more recent past, the Republicans have done it much more frequently. This measure would say, if you don't show up, you don't get to come back and do the job again. It's intended to make sure that we actually transact the people's business. We had one legislative session in the short year where the legislature was shut down, and in the entire legislative session, only 3 bills passed. And we lost the opportunity to deal with fires and with housing and with healthcare because the legislature had been shut down by the minority. I appreciate minority rights. I think we need to work across partisan aisles. We need to come to those compromises that treat all parts of Oregon well, but we shouldn't be held hostage to a process that allows us to shut down the legislature by a small group of people. Now, that being said, this measure has some things that need to be sorted out. It says that if you have 10 unexcused absences, you can't serve again in the legislature. Well, for how long? And does it mean you can't run for reelection, or does it mean if you do run for reelection and you win, that you won't be seated? There's some uncertainties in the way it's written, but I think the concept is good and proper, and we need to deal with the whole issue of walkouts here in Oregon because we've seen far too many of them.
Thank you very much. We're going to give Casey a turn now. Thank you for being with us this evening. And
Thank you.
I will say that your opponent, Carter McAtee, mentions, hello, everyone. Thank you for accommodating my absence by allowing me to have my answers to the questions read for me tonight. I'm sorry I could not be here physically due to a scheduling conflict, but I know that I wish I could be there with you all. Many of you know who I am by name at least, and I hope that to give you a little more insight as we go through the questions. If you're curious afterwards about me and the direction I want to take this county, or if you have any questions for me, go to electcartermcatee.com and you can get hold of me there. So the first question that I posed to both of you, and that you did respond to on Vote 411, thank you, is what are the greatest challenges facing the county and how will you address them? The answer from Carter McAtee is, housing is a great challenge. We see it everywhere. People are finding jobs here, but cannot afford to move here. It should be our top priority to make Lincoln County a more welcoming place that people feel they are able to relocate to. On a similar thread, I'm very worried about the homeless population in our county. We should be focused on helping these people to get the aid that is available and the help they need. Living in Lincoln County means we need to think about the ocean. While I'm very supportive of alternative energy, the possibility of wind power off the coast is a huge threat to our massive fishing industry. We need fishing. It's what many of our people do for a living. It's what created these towns we all love and call home. I will fight to keep the wind power stations from being built off our coast to protect our county's way of life. Another concern I have heard from many citizens is that the overpopulation of sea lions. I would like to find a solution that would bring down that population so that fish runs can survive and flourish in the future. And this is your turn for the question. What are the greatest challenges facing the county and how will you address them?
Well,
You might
issue-
introduce yourself too. I'm sorry.
Yes, my name is Casey Miller. I'm running for county commissioner. I have been the public information officer for Lincoln County for 14 years. And that is working inside the county commissioner's office and in our emergency management department for things like the Emergency Operations Center. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Turn it up just a tad. Okay. These issues, we're all too familiar with them. It is housing, it's mental health, it's physical health, it's income inequality. I think most of us are facing these challenges, and I'm going to tell you, well, and I will say this too. I've had a survey on my website that you can participate in, and those are the top responses: housing, work, homelessness, health, rent. So these are not, few of us are limited to these problems. So what's a county commissioner to do? I do want to say that a county commissioner does not have a magic wand. A county commissioner is not a silver bullet to solve all these issues. But the good news is county government does help alleviate a lot of these challenges. By nature of our service profile, we are health services, we are infrastructure, we are physical health, we are the backbone to economic development by our nature. And because of that, there is one thing we can do, and as we can make sure, or I can make sure as your county commissioner, and I will, the county government is run responsibly, that it's smart, that it's efficient. So that is my commitment to you, to make sure that that is a priority. And I think one of the ways we're going to get there is we're going to develop a county-wide plan. And what is that? Some people call it a strategic plan. It's the rules, it's the goals, it's the roadmap to run government well. And we don't have one. And it's a modern feature in modern counties. Now we're modern, but we just need to step it up a little bit and look to the future. We need to have a shared understanding across our departments about how we're going to deploy our services to you. And I'm really excited to do that. It's going to take a lot of work, but I think we can. Our sheriff's department has a strategic plan. Our health and services department has one, and we need to make one an overarching plan for the county. And I'm looking forward to doing it. And I think that is one thing that we can do to focus our energies for the community.
Thank you. I'm going to let you start off with question 2. And that is, what do you see as the county government's role in mitigating the impacts of climate change, such as the cause of wildfires, floods, heat domes, drought, and severe storms?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to say I do think climate change is real. Okay, right? Yes. Yeah, it is a challenge. And I would say if you don't think it's real, take your garbage and instead of taking it out to the can, put it in your living room and see how long that gets you, right? But where do we begin? We had an environmental forum just a couple nights ago. It's tough. People are struggling to find ways that they can be effective. And I will say one thing we need to do is have a climate action plan. Yes, another plan, right? Okay. But is it going to sit on the shelf? Well, a plan in the same way does a similar thing that a countywide plan does. It helps us show you how we're buying into the problem as an organization. What are we doing for renewables? What are we doing for recycling? And do we believe it at all, right? So as an organization, we're not demonstrating how we're solving the problem. It's another thing that we need to do. And I think we can do it because before we go outwardly and tell you how you should behave, we should demonstrate that as a business, county government for you. And I think that's one way to begin.
Thank you. See, I started with you. His answer to question number 2, I got to make sure I know where I am here. This is very difficult because many of these issues are at a state and even federal level. I believe counties should be actively advocating for what they feel is best to make sure that their way of life is something that can be sustained. I also feel it's the duty of local government to have measures in place for aid, food, and other necessities if one of these disasters were to occur. I love the coast. My family has been here for over 100 years. I want to make sure that we are doing what we can so that my family can continue to live here for hundreds more. We are all stewards of this place that we live, in this place that we live, and it needs to be protected and preserved. Moving on to question number 3. What steps would you take in order to make mental health and substance abuse services more readily available to all who need them? And we'll begin with Carter's answer. I feel this issue needs to be a coordinated effort. We need to help on many different levels, and our county simply can't take that on alone. If elected, I would love to work with the neighboring counties and work on finding funding through grants and other opportunities to create a crisis center that would help multiple counties' populations, a place to detox, get professional help, and to help those that need it get the medication that they are needing to stabilize their mental health and help them reintegrate with society. I am passionate about empowerment. I want to help these people struggling with their incredibly difficult circumstances, but I want to do it in a way that gives them the ability to help themselves and lead independent lives.
Well, the county provides mental health services. One of the challenges is there's a shortage of practitioners across the United States. So when we are recruiting for positions, what is the challenge? One of the challenges is housing, right? So it's a multifactorial problem. We are providing those services. We need more practitioners. We've got some efforts right now in recruiting. to try and let people know we have those positions available. But with a nationwide shortage, it is a challenge. Working with David as a commissioner, looking to workforce boards or the influence a county commissioner can have on bringing in the opportunity to create those jobs. I was talking with the sheriff today. Is it possible that we could create or facilitate the creation of a position to have a 2-year degree, for example, for a mental health practitioner? How can we get innovative about providing mental health services that doesn't necessarily need to be a bachelor's degree or a master's degree? We need to think creatively because the problem's not going to go away. And I will say this too, to people who are struggling, it is okay. Mental health is a piece of your total person. And I do think in our culture, we don't always see mental health as something that's needed. We need to change that. You know, the county is doing a good job at outreach. And I've talked to other families, couples. One couple member doesn't want to go see a counselor, right? So we need to change the perception that mental health is something we're all potentially struggling with. And from an insurance perspective, it needs to be seen the same as physical care. I will advocate for that and try and increase the general wisdom and do everything I can to make people feel okay that they're struggling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is a question posed for you, Casey. Each commissioner works in a certain area of interest. What might be your focus?
Well, I do kind of consider myself a generalist, but we have a new administrative model. It was established by Ordinance 517. And the older model was such that certain department heads reported up to commissioners, and we distributed those across the commissioners. Now we have a county administrator. He's
Could
here
you
today.
introduce the county commissioner?
Oh, Tim Johnson. Yes, he's our county administrator. He's
Thank
an-
you for coming this evening.
Yes, he's an amazing guy. He's really smart. But I do, he is. I'm learning a lot from him. But I do consider myself a generalist, and I would like to apply that. And now that we have a focal point for our entire team, the commissioners, I think, will have more bandwidth to look at all of the issues. So telling you I'm interested in everything is really true. And I'm just looking forward. Well, I would say this, as a public information officer, and to David's comments, I think emergency preparation is key. I don't want to scare people, but I think we're going to have continued issues with weather, smoke, health issues related to climate change. And we've really, really got to impress upon people to get prepared, okay? And do what you can, learn about it, have a plan. And we need to teach our kids too. So we've got a lot of work to do. Internally, we need to build our bench. We need to have more people dedicated to emergency response. Sorry, I woke you up that night. I had to tell you to evacuate your house. But so emergency preparation will be an area of focus for me.
Thank you. I appreciate both of you, and I think we're going to take just a moment to add in any of our city council folks here that would, I'm sorry. Yeah, I've had a few come up. We'll get the rest of them collected while you guys are moving forward. I see CM Hall, who I was expecting, is not able to make it. Dean, could you join us? Was there another question over here? Okay. Oh, no, you stay there. Oh, nice try. What I had hoped to do this evening was just, I'm winging it, and so are you guys now. But I think it's a rare opportunity that we have a chance to have representation of folks who are sitting on governmental structures at some area or hope to. So if I could ask the two of you who have just joined us, and then we're going to do kind of a, let's see how city, county, and state could work together better. We begin with you, please. And if you'd share the microphone there, you two.
All
Sorry.
right. I am Melissa Sumner. I am running for city council in Lincoln City, Ward 3.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, I missed the first part of your question. Just
No,
who I
that's
am.
it. Just to who you are, so we know who we're talking to here. And Mayor Sawyer has also. joined
I'm
us.
Dean Sawyer, the current mayor of Newport, and I'm running for my third term.
Thank you.
Gene, if I could just jump in for a second.
Sure.
You know, with elections tend to focus so much on the top of the ballot. Who's running for Congress? Who's running for governor? Who's even running for the Oregon legislature? But the further down the ballot you get, the closer you get to the issues that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. You know, the school boards, the city councils, the fire district, the water improvement district. I mean, these are the folks that teach your kids, that fill your potholes, and make sure that if your house catches fire, that there'll be somebody there to take care of it. So I always urge people to look further down the ballot at the good people that are running for those important jobs as well. They don't get all the attention, they don't get all the headlines, but they do the work. And I just wanted to make sure that I got that in here very early, how much we appreciate the people in all of the ballot, not just the top of the ballot.
Absolutely. I have to study this question for a minute, so we'll get back to it. I was struck with everyone mentioned housing and homelessness. And one of the pieces that hasn't really been talked about is the challenge of recruiting and bring in new people in our workforce in some of our very good jobs that we have. We'll start with shortages in the sheriff's office, but it goes across the board to the school district, who are desperately in need of more professionals at the school district, the hospital, you name it. And part of the problem is finding housing when they accept the job, and we lose good potential new professionals because they can't find the housing. So could we maybe just have a shared conversation about, from the city, the county, and the state level, anybody have any really good ideas as to what we might do about some of these problems? And I don't care where we start. Not her. All right, we'll start with those in the middle and we'll move out to the city.
One of the things I'm curious to see us explore is accessory dwelling units. It's just a slice. There are many components that we need to consider, but Deschutes County Planning or the Deschutes County, the planning department, along with their team, looked at accessory dwelling units and identified a possible 7,000 additional structures that could be added. So I just think that's something we might want to look at. Dean probably has some ideas about that. How could it work for the county? We at least need to take a look at it. It could be that you have a small tiny house for your in-laws, for example, but anything. I mean, we just need to really examine all the possibilities. And I think that's one we should explore.
David, what can the state do to help?
Well, two things. The first thing we can do is that we can write laws that encourage us to produce the kind of housing we need rather than simply the kind of housing that's most profitable for the people building it. The second thing we can do is bring home some dollars that can be invested in that kind of housing. And across the state, we wrote legislation to provide nearly $500 million in support for affordable housing statewide. We brought home, in particular here in Lincoln County, $6.5 million for housing right up here near the community college, and another $1 million to help address the challenge of homelessness and houselessness in Lincoln County. So that's $7.5 million right here, right now. But, you know, there's something else going on. We allocate the dollars, and folks at the local level need to figure out how to use those dollars. And part of that is figuring out if we want more housing, and we're building more housing than I've ever seen under construction in Lincoln County since Susan and I moved here 30 some odd years ago. Housing is being built. We're not building enough of it. And at some point, we're going to start to run out of space to build it in before we run out of houses to build. And so the challenge, the difficult challenge at local governments level is going to be zoning. It's going to be system development charges. It's going to be urban growth boundaries. Where are we going to find the buildable lands to build the new homes that we need? And those are going to be real hard local conversations because everybody wants more affordable housing as long as it doesn't mean a quadplex next door.
David, I'm glad you mentioned the urban growth boundary. I get these questions all the time. Why doesn't Newport grow? The problem we have here is we have the urban growth boundary, which we can't expand unless we get permission from the county and the state. And it takes years because the Land Use Board of Appeals put in regulations several years ago to limit that. The other problem that we have here in town is we have a lot of canyons. There's just not a lot of buildable property here. Bend is very fortunate. They can build east to Idaho and this is all flat. I tell people we should have been called Canyonville rather than Newport. So we have a real lack of places to build places. Recently I was contacted by a local hotel that wants to build here. We haven't had a new hotel built in Newport in 18 years. And there's only 2 places in town that they could build that it was large enough for them. And, you know, people call and tell me all the time, let's get Costco, let's get Home Depot. We don't even have any space available in the city that would accommodate them because they have a large footprint. That whether that's good, bad, or different, I'm not going to argue with that. One of the things that the city has done, we have a hiring problem, as you talked about. We have 25% of our city staff now that those jobs are open, and we can't find people to do them. And a lot of it is because they don't. The applicants can't find a place to live. And so one thing that we've done recently is we took a lease on 2 apartment complexes up in Agate Beach. So those 2 apartment complexes will be set aside for new city employees to come in to live there until they can find an adequate place to live. And I hear all the time that people say they come here, they try to find a place, they live in a hotel for a couple of months and then they give up and they go back to wherever they came from. And that's distressing because we need people here. The other thing that David talked about was affordable housing. We recently, a couple of years ago, built 110 affordable housing apartments in Agate Beach, which was really cool. The majority of that money came from the state. And it's a project that David and Commissioner Hall have been working on for years to get set aside money to set aside for these complexes. There's no way the city could afford $23 million for that project. It put 110 families in units. And what we found was the majority of those folks moved here from out of town. They have to live in Walport. They have to live in Toledo. They have to live in Sletz because they can't afford to live here. Now that there's that affordable housing, they can move into town because they will work here. We get 7,000 people a day come to Newport for jobs, and they come from as far away as Beaverton and Eugene. And that's a big number to me that we have that many people that come here for jobs. They can't live here because we don't have enough housing. And unfortunately, we don't have the land and, you know, flat land to put in subdivisions here. And it's frustrating to the council to try to get projects done because we just can't get developers to come to the table to build these large projects.
Melissa, are you seeing the same kinds of problems in the North County area?
Definitely. But one thing I can tell you that I'm proud of that we're doing in Lincoln City is I'm actually on planning commission and we're making some of those changes to zoning. Like we just tweaked some verbiage to now allow tiny home villages. But I think looking at creative housing, I love Casey's idea of ADUs. It's kind of a no-brainer to me that we start looking at those because that'll free up some of our other housing. And I mean, if you can build something above your home for mom and dad to live, now their house is for sale, there's more housing or more rentals available. And I personally, when we moved here in June, we were some of those people that lived in hotels. This was June of 2020 until we found somewhere to rent. And I offered to pay more for the rental. And that's honestly how I got it because it was just impossible to find some for us to live. So creative housing needs to happen. We have some apartments coming, but we need to have family housing too. One of the biggest struggles of renting in Lincoln County, can you take your pet? Do you have a yard for your kids to play in? So I think it's a lot more than just apartments.
A couple of follow-ups to that. David, could you weigh in a little bit on whether there are some sort of benchmarks out there that when the state does put money into some of these projects, what the expectation is in terms of how it gets spent, how soon it gets spent? And the other one I'm going to let you all think about and see if anybody wants to roll in is vacation rentals and any thought process on that.
Well, Gene's first question is essentially what the rules are regarding the money that the state brings forward. And I guess my answer to that question is it depends. Can anybody here tonight tell me who the next governor is going to be?
I'll give you three choices.
Because whatever rules are in place right now are subject to potential change come January when we have a new executive in Mahonia Hall. So that's part of the answer, Gene, and it's an awkward answer that really I don't think is very complete. The second part of your question had to do with the role of vacation rentals in the affordable housing mix.
Several folks that have mentioned that, so
Well, I
weigh in on that.
Well, how about if I pass the microphone off and we can talk about benchmarks and rules and how the money is spent, and then I'll come back and talk about vacation rentals. Do you want to do it that way, or do you want me to talk about vacation rentals now?
Well, I was going to let you wrap up your comments about benchmarks.
Okay, well, that was my wrap up.
Okay. And let me break in for just a moment and welcome CM Hall, also a city councilor here in Newport.
I've been listening the whole time. I thought the city council wasn't going to be featured. So I was walking my dog and then you said, come up, and like, so sorry for the.
Well, thank you for joining us. I had to make some adjustments in how the evening was rolling there. So obviously vacation rentals are a big issue in this community, and many buildings that might house a family are used for different purposes. So if any of you'd like to jump in on that.
The county started its short-term rental program in 2016, and I've observed every iteration of it. And, I don't really think we heard the community and the suffering that was going on, to be honest with you. Citizens took that into their hands with Measure 21-203. There were some technicalities. These things are complicated from a legal perspective. But personally, for me, I see myself as leaning pretty hard towards neighborhoods, families, not investors from outside the area. Now, certain types of structures I think are very suited for vacation rentals, but there are many, many and plenty that are perfect for small families. So I think the measure showed us how the community largely feels about this, and we should be sure to respond and make sure that a lot of these homes are for those that want to make this place their home. So that's where I'm headed.
Are you finding similar problems in Lincoln City as well?
It's kind of a mixed bag for me, to be perfectly honest. Tourism has its place, obviously, in our community. So it's important that there is somewhere to go. However, I firmly believe that our neighborhoods need to be kept intact. There's a character and a value of these neighborhoods that were built. For example, Rhodes End. Each one of them was developed with the certain values and characteristics. And if we keep putting these vacation rentals or whatever we want to call them in and taking away space for us to build family housing, and whether it's popular or not, now that we're over 10,000 people, we can have duplexes in other places. That solves some of our problem. So I think we need to look at the character of each neighborhood, but there needs to be enforcement. And I think that will also solve a lot of our problems, because the biggest complaint is parking and trash and the way they take care of the neighborhood. So if we had an enforcement plan, there probably wouldn't be as much argument about our vacation rentals.
Thank you.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
And then we're moving to that end of the
Well,
table.
and I will say the numerous calls that have come into the county commissioner's office, when we look back at Measure 21-203, many people thought that was going to affect the entire county. They didn't realize it was just unincorporated Lincoln County. So I think that is an indicator as well, that's where the tide is going, so to speak.
We battled this issue about 3 years ago. The city council talked about vacation rentals in Newport. And what we came up with is we had numerous public input on this, both sides. And what we did was we limited the vacation rentals in Newport to only 170. And that's about 2% of our housing stock. So we don't have quite the number that a lot of people think we do. The other issue is we have a waiting list now, and it's about a 3-year waiting list. So if someone wants to put a new vacation rental in, they're told it's going to be about 3 years, and a lot of those people just disappear because they don't want to do that. They go to other communities. I think that what's important for me is the other thing that the city council did was we enacted 2.5 positions in our police department for community service officers to be there to handle all the complaints. So if people had a complaint about noise, garbage, whatever the issue is, that these community service officers would go out and handle them. And if a location gets 3 strikes, if they get 3 complaints against them that are validated, then they lose their license. And we also have we've put in a couple of overlay zones in town, one being Agate Beach area, that if someone can't operate their vacation rental again in Agate Beach for more than 1 year, they lose their license. And we're trying to limit the vacation rentals in Agate Beach. We're hoping that that'll reduce the number out there. So there's things that can be done. But I think the big thing that what the council battled was we listened to people in town. We are a tourist community. Unfortunately, we have to think about that. And as I said earlier, we haven't had a hotel in 18 years. So there's a very much need. I think that, this last summer, I had a friend from Medford came up for a ball game for his kid. He got the last room at the La Quinta Inn, and it cost him $350. But that's just because of the demand, and that's why they can charge that. And it's sad to me that happens. But obviously, we are a tourist community. At the end of the day, it's a beautiful place. I came here 45 years ago, and I fell in love with Newport, and I stayed here. My original plan was to be here 1 year, and I can't leave. And I see so many other people that come here, the same thing. They say, well, I'll come here for a little bit and enjoy the coast, and they never leave. And I think there's probably a lot of people here in the audience tonight that have that same deal. But I think that the key to me on the vacation rentals, you need to regulate them. You need to say how many there are, and you also have to have the ordinances in effect that have the rules, and then they have to be enforced by the community service officers, which I think they do a great job.
Thank you. You want to weigh in on this at all?
I mean, just to the tail end of what Mayor Sawyer said was the regulation and enforcement pieces are some of the gaps that need to be closed still, because we don't have full-time 24/7 community resource officers, and most of the tourists come on the weekends. And so when those calls come into the hotline, they're not necessarily responded to swiftly. And by the time they are responded to and the infraction has been reported and routed through, those people have already left town. So there's still some gaps there that I think we're trying to address with hiring another community resource officer and increasing their hours. So, but that's the only thing I was thinking about that hadn't already been said.
Thank you. I know that we could spend the entire evening on this subject, but I'm going to try to just wrap up this particular conversation with a couple of things that I think belong more with the state and county. So you two in the hot seat there. Some people think that expanding the urban growth boundaries will contribute to higher prices. Do you think that's true or not? And can state laws be adjusted to remove certain advantages, such as mortgage tax credit for second homes?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, my seat just got warmer. Let's start with this. Vacation rentals are an important part of our local tourist economy, a very important part. As long as they are well managed, well regulated, and our local government has the resources to make sure that they abide by our rules. So we'll start with that. I think that the people of Lincoln County were really frustrated that they overwhelmingly voted for a measure, and then the courts turned around and said, you can't do that. I'm looking at legislation that'll make the adjustments so that local government has more local authority to make those decisions rather than having them completely overturned at the judicial level statewide. I also was instrumental in fighting back a piece of legislation that said local government can't control vacation rentals. I fought against that to make sure that local government would have the tools. And finally, I'm working with our vacation rental industry to try and address those bad actors that don't play by the rules. And oh, by the way, don't collect taxes or collect taxes and don't pay them in to local government and put the people who are following the rules at a competitive disadvantage. So your question, which I haven't answered yet, is you had a two-parter. One was about mortgage interest on second homes.
The first one was around whether urban growth boundary expansion seems to drive prices up and then second, the other part of that.
All right, so the urban growth boundaries. The problem that we've got is that we are stuck between the ocean and the mountains. And so before we can talk about whether we want to expand the urban growth boundaries, we got to figure out whether it's possible to expand our urban growth boundaries. But if we do, I think that more buildable lands creates more supply, and that would tend to drive prices down rather than up. That's what I learned in graduate school when I studied economics. More supply means lower prices. But maybe those fancy houses out on the edge of the forest are going to sell for more money, and it'll drive those prices up. I mean, there's exceptions to every rule. One of the things that's being debated, the second part of your question, is whether we want to remove the mortgage interest deduction on second homes. Boy, that's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a tough one here at the coast when so much of our economy is driven by people who are investing in second homes that they plan to move into when they retire and make them their first homes. There is certainly evidence in a recent Secretary of State audit to suggest that the people who are taking the advantage of the mortgage interest deduction on second home tend to be the wealthier of Oregonians and not entry-level families that are looking for a first home. So that's going to be a very complicated and very political conversation that I expect will unfold this session. There will be legislation proposing elimination of the mortgage deduction on second homes.
I'm going to shift the conversation about the challenges of people getting good jobs and keeping them here in this community to childcare. I want to put a plug. Our next regular membership meeting of the League of Women Voters is going to be discussing childcare and the community college's role in how they have a training program for people who are interested in going into the business. And now I'm putting myself at a disadvantage because I can't remember which location of the community college that meeting is going to be.
I believe Patty Littlehales wants it to be live streamed between all three locations.
Okay, well, stay tuned on that. Check the League of Women Voters website, but it's the third Thursday in November that we actually will be talking about childcare, an area that the League has been very interested in, but certainly a huge problem here in Lincoln County. So if just kind of briefly, if all of you that wish to could weigh in from the state, the county, and the city level efforts around expanding childcare availability. And I'm just going to preface this with one of the meetings we had. We heard a presentation from a local professional who, when she moved here with small children, the challenges she went through finding childcare to the point where she decided to put childcare in her home. And then all the challenges she found legally in doing just that. And she was a legal professional. So it's a striking issue that's very different for those of us of a generation where the neighbor kept your kid. So.
Well, the problem is that people who want to work here, first of all, can't find a house to live in. And if they can't find a house to live in, if they've got kids, they can't find childcare. And if they can't find it, they can't afford it. I mean, quite literally, a lot of entry-level workers will pay all of their take-home pay for childcare. And it's more cost-effective for one parent to stay home and take care of their kids and build that relationship than it is to work all day long and spend all your money hiring somebody else to do that same work. So what can we do about that? Well, Here in Lincoln County, there are 7 childcare slots available per 100 residents compared to Multnomah County where there's 22. We live in a very, very dry childcare desert. One of the things we can do is make it possible so that if you're taking care of your kids, that you can take care of your neighbor's kids as well. To do that legally, to do that in a licensed way, the rules used to say you had to have overhead sprinklers in your house to provide childcare. It was the Small Business Development Center that brought that to my attention in Salem. We got that rule changed. Sure, we want our kids to be safe and we don't want to see home fires, but overhead sprinklers don't protect people, they protect property. And so we made sure that if there's a childcare is on the main floor, there's not a stove or a fireplace between the kids and the exit, that you don't have to have overhead sprinklers. I also want to call out our wonderful community college that's offering classes to people in how they can provide childcare in an appropriate, licensed and legal way and meet the rules. And there's like, if I'm not mistaken, and shake your head if I'm wrong on this, you were charging $25 to take the class, and once you graduated, you gave them the $25 back. We're working to provide more childcare opportunities here because it's one of our most dire needs.
Yeah, and we are using ARPA funds. That's a temporary thing to explore some childcare grants. We've got to think creative, absolutely. I would be interested to see the county develop childcare possibly. We should explore it. It's going to be something, hopefully, we'll continue to address and provide more resources, but I'm curious to see what happens with us, what we learn from providing a grant to the community, and what are the creative solutions. I wish I could tell you I had the answers. That's going to be one of the things we need to keep working at an interjurisdictional level.
Any ideas from the city level?
No ideas, but more problems. We see that all over town. And when we talk about this at length at city council meetings, Cynthia Jacoby is here, our city councilor. She's kind of our resident expert on childcare, and she's been advocating it for years. Unfortunately, at the city level, we don't have the resources the state and the county has that we need that I know that David is working very hard on. And I would just want to echo what he said. I have a friend that does childcare here in the county. And when she found out she needed a sprinkler system at her home to do that, she called me and said, I can't afford it. And then when David came up with the idea to eliminate that, that was huge because, you know, she just has a house and she has about 8 kids that she takes care of. And she would have had to kick those 8 kids out. And I think childcare is important right now for me as well, because I have a grandson that lives in Albany. His mother is a school teacher and his father owns a restaurant. They both work more than 40 hours a week. A couple of weeks ago, they had a COVID breakout at the daycare center for my grandson, and they had no place to take him. You know, he has to be separated. He didn't have COVID, fortunately, but he still has to. So my wife drove over every day to take care of him. And it's just unfortunate fortunately, we're both retired, so she could do that. But if she wasn't retired, I don't know how we would have taken care of our grandson. It is a huge problem, and we definitely need to address it.
It is, but that's what grandparents are for too.
So I guess that class needs to be for grandparents. That class, the Newport Parks and the Recreation Center is looking at expanding to have like a childcare facility, essentially not just like after school, but day long, but also to potentially be subcontracted by someone who could really manage and oversee that, so we could address more of the need in our community. So that's one just add that I wanted to make sure got said.
And talking about the childcare at the Park and Recs Department, part of our problem was when we had COVID, we had to close the rec center. And that put another burden on working families. Do you work? How do you take care of your kid? What do you do?
Absolutely. Melissa?
I was just going to say one thing we could look at, and I hope we do look at, is creative childcare. Like some of the companies I used to work for, bigger companies, obviously, but they offered childcare at work. So they found programs to set aside a room. Like one of the hotels I worked in, they took 2 suites, opened it up and turned it into a childcare center for the employees. Those are game-changing things we need to look at. And I remember when I was in middle school, you took a class about being a babysitter. Maybe we go back to looking at educating our kids to take care of the neighborhood. I mean, there's solutions to it. We just have to get really creative, and then there needs to be housing so that people can work and get, it's a domino effect, but.
I think we're beginning to go in circles here, but we have plenty of problems.
Jean, have grandparents discovered YouTube and Minecraft? Just check it.
Actually, I've got an interesting question here that I would be interested in the answer to. So Casey, we're going to give this to you. Has the county been able to provide residents with telemedicine for mental health?
Yes, yeah, yes. And I think it's something that's growing. Maybe a little cliche to say the silver lining of COVID. I used telemedicine. We saw a counselor for our son at the Alala Center. And it was great. What I'm told by practitioners is, it's not like being with people. They prefer that, but it is something and it will work, and it worked for us. So it's good to see it being used to scale up services to people.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate all of you being willing to participate. CM, I apologize that I wasn't as clear as I could have been. Are there any burning questions that one of you would like to ask anybody else sitting up there?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. You mentioned it, you touched on it earlier that there's kind of a malaise right now and people aren't watching all the races that are happening right now. And they're very important. And I think that we need to look at every race. And I know that CM and I are running unopposed right now. Please vote for us if you like us. If you don't like us, vote no. I mean, let us know. That's how we gauge how the community thinks about us. If everybody writes in Mickey Mouse, it's not going to help us, and that's okay. Mickey probably should. Anyway, but I think that there are critical races in our county. Lincoln City has several councilor positions, and the mayor. Walport has councilor positions, and the mayor down there. These are very important. So if you live in those communities, please look at those out. And I want to thank Jean for doing this forum. I think I've done these for 12 years now, and I love them. I don't do a lot of campaigning personally because I don't take endorsements and I don't take contributions. So I just do it on my own. But it's important for me to get my message out to the community through the League of Women's Voters. And I so appreciate all the work that you and your cohorts are doing.
Thank you.
I just wanted to comment just one more thing on the childcare thing. And it kind of connects to so many of the other topics we've had tonight around housing and jobs and childcare. But we are running unopposed. And a big part of that could be because people don't have their housing needs met, or people don't have their childcare needs met. So they can't attend to the riveting world of Newport City Council. So if those other things aren't being met, and then they can't really focus on what other things are going on in their community. And that's a really valid concern. So it is everyone's work and responsibility to work to ensure we have housing and childcare. And I disagree with Mayor Sawyer in that I think that local politics, as Representative Gomberg mentioned earlier when I was listening on Zoom, mentioned, it is about what happens locally. And when you still only have one person running, I do think people sometimes don't go all the way down the ballot. And I think it is really important to vote, even when one person is running, because they are stepping up to serve publicly. And in this day and age, when we are constantly feel like we have a target on us, I am really appreciative for people who are public servants. It means a lot to me to get the privilege to serve this community that I love so much. And I know people might not turn over the ballot and go all the way down or whatever, but I would ask for your vote. And I don't anticipate being a perfect, city councilor on everyone's issue. And that's actually kind of what I appreciate about it, is so many people are so committed to seeing our city thrive. And sometimes we have different ways that we look at that. But I hope you will vote, and I hope you will vote all the way down the ballot, because it matters. And it shows that we have concern. We're here on a foggy night, as Representative Gomberg mentioned. We care about our communities, and I want to thank everyone who's running, regardless of their partisanship. It matters to be in the conversation.
Thank you.
I would disagree with her.
Okay, now you're not
It's
having
just-
an argument here.
She is a perfect counselor.
Any other closing comments?
I would ask, find the patience. I suspect everybody who's here, those who are watching, they're interested. they do realize that this makes a difference to be informed on who to choose, but people are struggling. Remember that, take a moment. Not everybody has the bandwidth to tune in, and maybe they just don't see it from where they're at and in their place in life right now. So turn up that compassion and empathy just a little, and remember, listening, even when it's someone from the opposite side, makes a difference. Everybody needs to be heard. We fundamentally need that as human beings. And it will help neutralize the anger and the frustration. So I ask that we all take a moment, take some time to listen, even sometimes when we've ran out of patience, because it will produce more love ultimately. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Sure. I would just say, I agree. Flipping over the ballot is important because how lucky are we in Lincoln County that so many people want to volunteer for us? Because it's not paid. It's definitely a volunteer and it's a choice that we make. I mean, I didn't realize how much impact even I had until I swear I didn't know I was speaking today. You can ask. But I had a really sweet small business owner call me and said, I have a present for you. And it's because she values my opinion and what I do for her. So that is my, not just thank you, to everyone, not just the candidates, but the community who pays attention.
Thank you. David, we'll let you have the last word or two.
Well, I certainly want to thank the league again, and I want to thank all of you for your interest this evening. Lincoln County is remarkably diverse. The challenges, the needs, the priorities of Newport are different than Lincoln City, Siletz and Toledo, different than Waldport. I mean, the people that live in our unincorporated areas, and even within those communities, remarkably diverse populations, which creates remarkable challenges for all of us. But the point that I wanted to make is that Lincoln County here also has found the opportunity, the ability, the will to work together at all levels of government. Our mayors meet from across the county on a regular basis. They invite the county commissioners, they invite our legislators. Excuse me. We talk, we strategize, we consider what the challenges are, and every single one of them has got everybody else's phone number, so they know they can pick up the phone and say, how did you solve that problem? Or can you help me solve this one? We work well together here for the benefit of our very diverse population. Not always easy, but I think if you've been watching us tonight, you may have inferred that from nothing else than the friendly collegiality up here on the stage, that we know each other, we like each other, and we work well together.
Thank you. I would like to apologize to the municipalities. When I looked at doing this forum and I looked at where the competitive races were and tried to time out something, which went really well tonight. My timing was totally off, but I looked at how many contested races there were in all of the city governments across the county. And I knew that I couldn't handle all of those in one evening. So that's the reason that for this forum, we didn't include the races in Lincoln City and Depot Bay and Yachats and Waldport and Siletz and Toledo. There are challenged races in all of those communities. And I'm sorry we couldn't find time to do them all. But for those of you who chose to come tonight and participate, I really do appreciate it. I said that I had served at different levels of government. I was in elected office for over 20 years. But in today's mail, I got a magazine about Pacific University in Forest Grove, which is my husband's alma mater. And it's also the alma mater of Les Coyne, if anyone remembers that. And he's just donated all of his papers and history to Pacific University. But the quote on the outside that caught my eye was, I would not thrive in today's Congress, but I would hope for change and try like the devil to affect it. I would not thrive in today's legislature either, but I really hope that we can find some cohesiveness and work more across the aisle than has been exhibited lately. That's not a productive way to move forward. I was asked about why Celeste McEntee wasn't able to attend this evening. She simply told me that her schedule was full and didn't have a space for it on this particular date. It's challenging to run and for elected office, and it's challenging to meet all your scheduling requirements. I was disappointed that we weren't able to have the give and take that we had hoped for, but for those of you who came and for those of you who are here in the audience, ask good questions, and all of the folks listening at home, I really appreciate the participation. The league is committed to an educated electorate who will make responsible choices. So thank you all, and thank you to the college for doing this for us.
Casey, just, yeah, just,